What happens when a dud does not go thud at the box office? Well, you have Moana 2, one of the worst movies to ever have a shot at breaking $1 billion. Today, we'll tell you why the original Moana should be getting this box office credit and why it may be a debit taken out against Disney for future Moana films, hurting them badly. Folks, get ready for analysis with a fidelity you'll find nowhere else after this. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel that is continuing to give you the latest in news when it comes to entertainment. Breaking it down and keeping you ahead of the culture curve, it's what we do. And Moana 2 is earning a tsunami of box office revenue just as we said it would. We've told you now for a year or more that all Disney had to do with Moana was release a sequel, make it not woke, and do not get out there and be divisive in the marketing, and it would make $1 billion minimum. Now, one of the things that I never anticipated, though, was that they would release a very poor Moana sequel. Like, I thought average was the worst they would do because surely they had enough sense in their heads to know that this is their biggest and most important princess franchise. And yes, she's a princess, even if she says she's not. Oh, what a horrible mistake by Disney on that one. And no, Frozen is not the biggest princess franchise. And how do we know that? Well, because Moana has been the biggest streaming movie year after year, and that is with basically zero push from Disney to make that happen. It was all organic, just like her island of Motunui. It was all organic all along. I want to go to Metacritic, though, because not since Transformers have we seen movies of this low quality generate this kind of box office. But you'll notice something, and that is that Transformers, while it still exists, it doesn't have nearly the sway. In fact, the last Transformers movie that was released was a flop. And Moana 2, I think, puts this into Transformers territory. I'm going to explain. But before I do, let's take a look at the Metacritic score. Folks, click the like button. Here we go. Moana 2, which we gave a 4 out of 10 here on this channel, has a 57 on the Metascore. That's based on 41 critic reviews. It has a user score that is even lower at a 5.1 based on 131 user ratings for Moana. So not good for Moana whatsoever. And yet it is generating huge revenues. We'll get to the revenues in a moment, and I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. Will it break $1 billion? I'll explain in just a few. Take a look at this, though. If you go to Rotten Tomatoes, you'll see that things are more favorable for Moana and Maui, although Maui is barely in this film. Again, going to the issues that just say that they did not care. Like Bob Iger, when he said, take this from a TV show and make it into a movie, and they said, well, Bob, we really can't, and here's why. He said, screw that, do it, we'll make money. But there's a cost involved in doing that, by the way. And it's the same cost that you would incur if you had a wonderful, world-famous steakhouse. And, you know, the original Moana, I think, is a 10 out of 10. In fact, I think it's a perfect movie. I really do. I think it's up there with Beauty and the Beast. I think it's up there with Lion King. It's one of the greatest films Disney has ever made. And I mean it. And it's one of the most recent films like that. And so if you had a steakhouse that served wonderful, tremendously good steak, and it was, you know, everybody said it's the best ever. And then you said, okay, well, we're going to do a thing now where we're going to open a new one. And it's going to have the name of the steakhouse. It's going to be in the neighboring town, and we're going to generate all kinds of money. But at this one, we're going to serve day-old microwaved Burger King patties instead of steak. Well, that's what Moana 2 is. It's edible, it's viewable, but even kids are snoozing through it. But Rotten Tomatoes is more favorable with a 64% rating from critics and an 87% from audiences. Well, that's very different than Metacritic, so that needs some explaining, right? Well, here's how we can explain it. If we take a look at the tomato meter, it's got a 64% review score, but you'll notice something is missing now. Once upon a time, Rotten Tomatoes, as in just up until recently, would allow you to divide from all critics and top critics. And top critics, those were the people who had jobs that were not dependent on early access and all of that. They worked for places like Forbes or Variety, the trades, you get the idea. And so they could give a bad review score and it would not harm their career. However, most critics don't have that luxury. If you give a bad review score for Moana 2, for example, and you're an independent critic, then there's no guarantee that Disney will invite you back to review another movie early. And the early reviews, well, that's what it's all about, because if you don't have an early review, then you're just one of us, right? By the way, folks, here on this channel, we have said that we will never review a movie early, and we don't judge anyone who does. I think it's a fantastic thing for them to do that. But we actually penalize ourselves. We actually take punitive damage against our own selves here on this channel by saying, even when given early access, and we've been given early access before, even when that happens, we never watch nor review until the movie is out, lest we give the appearance of a quid pro quo. In other words, no one can ever say the Pro Channel got early access, therefore they gave a good review. We'll never do that. And, does that hurt us? Maybe, but that's okay. Now, the all critics, that means that everybody's bundled together. My thought on this is it's very likely that reviewers who had career security likely reviewed this more poorly. And the reason that I think that's probably the case is because if you look down here, it has a 6.1 out of 10 rating. In other words, the average score is actually below the average. You see that? It's a little convoluted. Let me say it again. The average score is below the average fresh versus rotten level. And 6.1, by the way, is just barely above the rotten level. 6 is the cutoff, right? And if we look at audience versus verified audience, all audience versus verified audience, you'll see that 81% of all audience has rated this at 81%. I don't think this will be around much longer. They'll take away the all audience as well. Because what they really want is they want verified audience, because they can manipulate that because it's a smaller sample size. And they want all critics, not top critics, because, well, all critics are going to give a movie a more preferable score, probably. And ultimately, Rotten Tomatoes has lost its way. Once upon a time, it was a reliable place to go, but that's been many years ago. Nowadays, it's a promotional tool. Now, how did you get 81% positive on an all audience? Well, most of the people going to see the movie in the first few days are going to give something a positive score. That's your super fans, right? Okay, well, let's talk about the numbers, because ultimately, if Moana 2 breaks $1 billion or however much it makes, I mean, they're saying that it has a $150 million budget. That's really not true. Moana 2 had a $150 million budget as a TV show. Its movie budget is probably different, but this is so intertwined and mingled together. It's like untying a very convoluted knot. So what's the actual budget on this movie? Hard to say. Really, really difficult to say. More difficult than any movie I think that we're going to come across. I don't know how much this cost. Flat out. Like, it could be $200 million. It could be $300 million. We don't know how many other studios were brought in to work on this to get it done in a 6-month deadline from TV show to movie. Like, we have no idea what the cost of this is. Anywhere from $200 to $450 would not shock me. Above that, I'm getting shocked. But anywhere in between, I'm not going to be surprised. That's a really strange thing. But it speaks to the chaotic nature of getting this movie made. Now, they have made the movie, and it is blowing away the records, right? But folks, I'm here to tell you that it's blowing away the records in a way that we should possibly say, perhaps this box office belongs to the original Moana. Because were this a standalone movie, the sequel, very few people would be going to see it, because it's a genuinely bad movie. When you take away the animation, the visuals, and the voice acting, the story, just the story and the soundtrack are like 2 out of 10. They're really bad. Maui doesn't show up until the last 30 minutes of the movie, really. Moana takes 35 minutes to get off her island. There's no villain. There's no explanation of why she needs to go to do what she needs to go do. The characters are annoying. I don't want to retread it, but it's a bad movie. Now, that said, it's beautiful. And auli'i Cravalho and Dwayne Johnson give it everything they've got. So I gave it a 4 out of 10. That said, by itself, this is a bad movie. So how is it making $384 million in its first week? Well, it's doing that because people loved the original Moana. The original Moana only made something like $650 million. total at the box office. And that's because it was an original IP that people were just getting used to, and then they fell in love with it over the last 8 years tremendously. Again, most popular Disney movie right now there is, the original Moana. So much of what we're seeing right now in the box office is money that you could genuinely, generally, and I think honestly take and just stick it on the original Moana and say, you know what, you deserve this. Like, here's $384 million that you, original Moana, you earned this. The sequel, on the other hand, is actually a diminishing asset. Okay? So think of Moana 2. Okay, here's a great way to think of this. The original Moana, financially, is like owning a home. It is an appreciating asset. It is gaining value over time. And it did. Moana 2 is a depreciating asset. It is devaluing the franchise and its potential. And I'll make that very clear and obvious how that is. And I don't think you'll be able to disagree with this. After the original Moana, I said consistently for years that any Moana sequel, as long as it wasn't woke, and as long as they did not market it in a woke way, it would make $1 billion minimum. And this probably will. After Moana 2, I no longer say that. You say, well, Pro, what in the world are you talking about? It's breaking records, right? Well, sort of in the way of Transformers. And that is to say that you can send people to go enjoy this, and you can get vast numbers of people who go in with the expectation of enjoying this. But when they don't enjoy it, and when kids don't enjoy it, then you have a problem because, yes, you made a lot of money, but you made a lot of money on the back of disappointments. Merchandise is what we're watching. And folks, pay very close attention to what I just said. We will know what the full ramifications of putting out a bad movie based on the most popular brand Disney owns right now. We will find out what the ramifications are through merchandise sales. So we will be watching this holiday season to see, does Moana 2 merch sell out or does it sit? We will also be watching to see, what is the multiplier? So Moana 2 has a $384 million haul after its first week. What is the multiplier? Is it a 2x? Is it a 2.5x? At minimum, this movie should get a 3x. And the reason that it should at minimum get a 3x multiplier is because it has no competition in December all the way up until Sonic 3 and Mufasa. And I don't know that either of those are really competitive because both of those are aimed at boys and Moana 2 is aimed at girls. There's an argument to be made that Moana 2 has no competition for months. So, therefore, the runway is wide open. Moana 2 should, at minimum, get a 3x multiplier. Now, I don't think it's going to beat Inside Out 2, but it should break $1 billion. And so looking at what it's doing right now and understanding the market and understanding that it has no competition, one might say that it probably is headed for $1.3 billion. However, if it comes in significantly under that, let's say that it struggles to reach the billion mark, then what that would indicate is that word of mouth is so negative about this movie, and rightfully so, that people are no longer interested in going because they'd rather wait on Disney Plus to sleep through it. The problem for Disney is that, remember going back to the appreciating asset that was the original movie? The problem is that for Disney, Moana 2 is like a very expensive car they cannot afford. It's taking them places very quickly, record-breaking speeds, but it's draining their bank account. And what I mean by that is that when the next Moana comes out, the live action, or when Moana 3 comes out, no longer can I say to you that it will break $1 billion as its baseline. That's what I could say because people love the first one that much. Now, any other Moana property, any other Moana movie will have to earn its way back to the top because they've pulled the rug out from underneath the franchise. Moana 2 doesn't do quite as much damage to Moana as The Last Jedi because it's two different kinds of bad. The Last Jedi destroyed canon and was offensive. Moana 2 is boring. Those are two different kinds of bad. But what it does do is it makes people less inclined to give it time the next time. So, that is why there's an argument to be made now that this might be one of the worst billion-dollar movies that Disney has ever made, and it might be that they have sacrificed the future for a very short-term gain. And that's a game that can only be played by a CEO, Bob Iger, who's just trying to spend enough capital and enough cachet at the company to get out in 2 years unscathed. Very sad to see it happening, and we'll see what goes on. Remember, we're paying attention to the multiplier. 2x, 2.5x, 3x. 2.5x is the minimum. If it doesn't get 2.5x, that's a bad situation. It really needs to be at 3x. Really, really. All right, folks, it's a profit no matter what, but if it takes away money from the future, well, it'll be somebody else's problem, not Bob's, right? That's what he's thinking. All right, folks, click the like button, share, subscribe, click it and stick it to the algorithm as it is the notification bell. Drop a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts. And, folks, we hope you'll share this out on your favorite social media network so other people can understand what the heck is going on with Moana 2. Why is it doing so well if people say it's not all that, well, good? Hope you understand now. It's because they loved something, and Disney yet again has taken it and made it blasé. All right, don't be blasé, folks. Get out there and make the world a better place wherever you are and whatever you're doing. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Floral, it's time for you to walk the plank.
What? Why?
Cuz you haven't subscribed to WDW Pro yet. Nor bookmark thatparkplace.com on your web browser to get great articles from great contributors.
What?